Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Book of Burgher. This video is going to be so different than anything else I've done before or anything I'll ever do in the future. I'm almost certain of it. And so I want to give a little bit of background and context for it because it is so unique. So at the beginning, my dad was a high school shop teacher. His name is Don Burgher. Dad was a high school shop teacher, as I said. He did a couple other things, other teaching things. He taught some science, he taught some math. He unwillingly taught some English, did some other things throughout his career. But he was primarily a high school shop teacher. He spent 2 years in a little town called Walnut, Iowa, and then moved to Dallas Center, where he was a high school shop teacher at Dallas Center Grimes, which was previously Dallas Community. Came to Dallas Center in 1965 until his death in 1993. He spent 28 years in that district until his death. He was also a local business owner. He owned a trailer park. He owned a boat business, boat repair, motor business. I've talked about that a little bit in the past. And so he wore lots of hats. He was members of various organizations, city council, civic organizations, Lions Club, things like that. He was a known fixture in the community. He was very known as a disciplinarian. He was known as a very had high expectations for how people were going to do things and how he was going to be treated and how he was going to treat others. He lived by a certain code of conduct, so to speak. So when he passed away, he drowned very kind of tragically, very quickly. He was in a fishing, boating situation where he drowned. And anyway, so it was very sudden, very difficult for me, but also difficult for others in the community. And so several of his former students, people that he knew throughout the years, would, they'd get together and they'd know who I was and they'd tell me a story about my dad. It was not uncommon for me to be out and about here or there and hear a story about dad or what have you. And that was kind of a really a cool thing to be able to hear all of these stories. And there's one of his students in particular, and there are several that have told lots of stories over the years, but one in particular that his name's Monty, and Monty and his wife also own a business. They own a sawmill and various businesses deal with trees and things. And Monty and I would cross paths here and there, and I'd say, gosh, I'd just love to sit down and talk and hear these stories and things like that. And there were some occasions where I was able to hear a story or two, but never really an opportunity just to sit down and really get into it. After a meeting, he texted me and said, hey, we got to get together and make this happen. We got to do it. And so we sat down a date. So October the 6th, 2019, he got he did a lot of legwork. He got several people, contacted lots of people. That some could make it, some couldn't. It was kind of a spur of the moment deal. But at the same time, we planned it 2 weeks out. And so there was some time, but not, it wasn't like you could plan crazy ahead for what we were going to do. But we ended up getting together. And he and his wife were both gracious to host all of us in and told stories and reminisced. And it gave my kids an opportunity, my two older children, an opportunity to hear the stories. We wanted to capture it. It was Monty's idea, even though you would think I do these videos, why would I not capture that? But I didn't even think about it. And he said, is there a way we can capture it? I think, absolutely. And so this is the fruits of that conversation.
Well, I'll just share this with you. I stumbled onto this. This is just out of Daily Bread, and I just recently stumbled onto this. And I thought, this is really fitting about, I think, Don, what I thought of him anyway. So I'll just share this with you. talking about finances and wealth and so forth. He says, I never met a rich man who was happy, but I've only very occasionally met a poor man who did not want to become rich. Most of us would agree that money cannot make us happy, but we might like to have more so we can just be sure. King Solomon's net worth has been estimated at more than $2 trillion US. Although he was very wealthy, he knew that money had great limitations. Proverbs 8 is based on his experience and offers wisdom's call to all people. I raise my voice to all mankind. My mouth speaks what is true. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you can desire can compare. So I thought about this, and I never thought of Don having really an exorbitant amount of wealth. He did well for himself, provided for himself, but he was never known in the community as a wealthy man, financially or with intrinsic value. But he had wealth in so many other areas. And he had wisdom. He had good instruction to us as kids. He had tremendous knowledge. And so he was very, very wealthy, but just in different terms. And so that's why I thought this would be very fitting here to share this anyway. So let's open up the prayer if we could. Thank you so much, God, for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Thank you so much, God, for allowing this group to gather here together and reminisce on some times 40 years and plus back. And we thank you so much, God, for the fact that you placed Mr. Burgher in our path. And thank you, God, that you gave him the teaching and the skill set that he was able to share with us and so many of us. And this is just a fraction of the people that he touched and influenced for so many years. And we just give thanks, God, for that. We just ask, God, you bless this conversation, bless these stories, so all this can be relived and shared for future generations for down the road. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm just going to open up here just with this, and then I'll quit. But, I just wrote this here this morning. I just thought about this. Even though it has been 40 years since Mr. Burgher taught me, excuse me, he is still the smartest man that and has had so much expertise in so many areas that I've ever known. He taught woodworking, sheet metal, welding, foundry, lathe work, small engines, automotive that kids from other schools came, which was Adele. He taught plastics, electricity, drafting, and he was outstanding in all of these topics. And I'll share some things here that I actually brought. I'll show them here just a little bit, but projects I made, I happen to keep. So, but anyway, let's just go around the room here and just start sharing stories here. So, however you see fit.
He taught me everything he knew and then some, because that's where I got all the background of what I live by and the common sense that I live by every single day. I utilize his skill or his mindset and skills, and my father and mother divorced, and he kind of took me on as a son, and I did family trips with him down with grandma and grandpa, and duck hunting. I remember that, down at Riverton, and take you out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. You didn't even know where you was. You'd wake up and you were all of a sudden you were shooting ducks, and then we went deer hunting and stuff. And I had all sorts of good times with him, but I stayed with him until after I graduated high school, and probably maybe should have taken over helped him and taken over the shop. And after he passed away, probably offered, and I just wasn't in a position in my life to do it at that time. And no, it was it's where I draft a lot of my knowledge. I was just one of those curious boys that went around if there was something going on, if they were pouring concrete in town or whatever. And he building the new shop, I think it was in '73, when they were building the new shop that's there today. He was building that shop, and I was over there watching and whatever. And he came over and he says, nobody just stands around. Either you help or get the hell out of here. Pardon the French, but that's what he said. And I started helping, and that's how it all began. And then that first Christmas, he bought me my first set of tools, which I still have a hammer. I keep putting handles in it, and I still have the original set of wrenches that I had, Craftsman wrenches that I had. So, he definitely influenced me majorly, and still today continues to. So.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Husker. I had him for about one semester after Leroy Jokins, the previous teacher, started teaching chemistry. But about the third or fourth day we were in there, a fellow student, Bruce Rickers, did show up, and as he was taking roll, you could hear a kind of a commotion in the back, but nobody could see Bruce, and there were a whole bunch of pipes in the back of the building, and you could pull boards up there, boards over the pipes. And a couple of guys had stuck Bruce under there, and they were sitting on the boards with chairs so that he couldn't say he was present. And Don was up front going, "Where's Bruce?" And then you hear a commotion and nothing. Finally, he says, "I know Bruce is in here. Come on, let him out." So that was one of my first experiences. He didn't say anything at all. He just laughed and said, "Don't do it again." And he was a good teacher. He had a sense of humor too. He helped me with I was making a lamp. It was a cypress knee, and he helped me finish that next semester. That's the one thing. In fact, I think I've still got the lamp. That's one of the things I remember. He was a nice guy. I liked him.
I'm Dale Myers. I had Mr. Burgher for woodworking, plastics, sheet metal and welding, small engines. Didn't have him for electricity. We had Mr. Bennett's. And he was, I'll just make this comment, Mr. Bennett's was basically fresh out of college. He tried to be Mr. Burgher, but he didn't have it. And he was a good teacher, but he was just different. But I'm sure he was mentored by Mr. Burgher, but he just wasn't didn't have the same personality, I guess. I always enjoyed working with my hands, and Mr. Burgher, he just enhanced that interest in different trades. Monty mentioned that he was just good at everything. Wealth of knowledge. Jerry mentioned his sense of humor, and I really liked his sense of humor. He had a way of calling attention to your mistakes in a humorous way, as long as you were willing to receive it. We were in woodworking class, and there's a big guy. I'll try to keep names out of this. There's a big guy in our class, graduated with me, and they were, him and another guy, I don't remember who the other one was, were getting ready to cut out the woodworking project. And they had fired up the table saw, and they had a 4x8 sheet of plywood, 3/4 inch plywood, and they were starting to cut out the woodworking project. And I was working on something, and I looked over, and you hear that saw just labor, and smoke was coming off the blade. And I thought, what in the world? And I saw Mr. Burgher. He had been up by the wash sink, and he starts walking toward the south there. You remember the breaker panel over there? He just kind of slowly walks over there and shuts the saw off. "Gentlemen, let's go over here and see what his problem is over here." Well, of course, he put the blade in backwards. And it wasn't going through, and so he leaned on it, and big guy, and he leaned on it, and the old saw was just laboring. So that was one experience. And then back during that time, the Vietnam War was on, and there was right in that period of time, there was a common thing. There was a lot of the boys would wear old Army surplus coats to school, and there was one guy in our metal class that regularly had one of the big old baggy coats on. And one day, Mr. Burgher found a pack of cigarettes in his coat. Had it hanging over his, those bar stools that we used to work on our stuff, sit on for class. And he summons everybody. He said, "Come on, guys, come over here. Let's see what Ted brought to class today." And he has this whole pack of cigarettes, and he summons us over to the metal shear. And so he gets that pack of cigarettes out, and he sets the fence for about that deep, cut. And he goes, cut him into a little pile of nothing. He looked at Ted and he says, Ted, that was fun. Why don't you bring some tomorrow? We'll do that again. Okay, everybody back to work. There was more than one of those, or more than those two things. But it would kind of embarrass you in ways. But the point was brought home that pay attention or don't do these things. And I don't know that I ever saw him get angry. Don't remember that. But I was my senior year. They started a program. It was a career opportunities program or something. I don't remember what they called it. But anyway, if you had enough credit and your grade point average was high enough, for the last semester of your senior year, you could go out on a work release type thing that was related with a trade of some kind. And you would leave at 11:30 or noon, whatever the lunch break was. And then the afternoons, you would go work. And then there was reports by the employer. Mr. White was the one that administered that. And so I went to work at Wagner Eckert up Main Street, John Deere. Mr. Burgher was not happy with me because of that, I could not take auto mechanics the last semester, which I really didn't want to miss, but I wanted to do this thing. I guess maybe typical boy, if I'm out of school, that's a good deal. I don't know really now what I was thinking, but he told me one day when he found out that was the case, he said, I had you scheduled to get the Gold Hammer Award, but you're not going to get it now because you have to take, I don't remember, there was requirements as far as, how many classes you had to have or whatever. And so that was a decision I made, and no Gold Hammer, but I somehow lived. So, but he played a big role in much of what I know today. He had a real way of stirring not only abilities up in people, but to draw, at least at that time, young boys, and getting them interested in various trades. And the thought of doing excellent work, doing it right. We had to sharpen tools and it had to be done right. Welding. He caught some guys, in his own way, he caught guys smoking in a welding booth. He couldn't prove it for sure, but he walked outside one day and the ventilation system was throwing cigarette butts out the van on the north side of the building. I think that's where it would have been. Pretty wise guy. He had boys figured out pretty good. Yeah.
Go ahead. So anyway, I had him for woodworking, plastics, power mechanics, auto mechanics. Might have been sheet metal, but I don't remember for sure. I do know we worked with some sheet metal. And I learned quite a bit of what I know about what the makings of an engine through power mechanics. And me and one other person would work together and we'd tear down the single engine motor and rebuild it, and then he'd bug it 3 times and we had to get through that. And I learned quite a bit through power mechanics. I took auto mechanics, but I didn't learn near as much because it was a group activity under the hood. And generally speaking, the rest of the guys were working at that. I did well with acetylene welding, but I think I might have got a D- on the pad, on the arc pad. I didn't do well with that for some reason. So I don't know a whole lot to say. I wasn't close enough to Mr. Burgher to know him on that level that some of the rest are talking here. There was some negatives and there was some positives, but I was able to learn in this class. I don't remember being on the negative side of him as far as discipline. I don't think I ever got the nub. Anyway, I had a hard time in school, and some of the guys would take advantage of that. And I remember one time being over in the south at the workbench, and I had a drill bit. And I don't remember the details anymore. I mean, I had more than the drill bit. I had the drill with a bit in it. And there ensued a struggle over this drill bit because somebody else wanted it too. And like I say, I don't remember the details, but some opportunist third person came over and plugged it in. So we ended up with a drill bit in the armpit. I remember Mr. Burgher at that point making it a point with the rest of the class that this isn't going to be happening. This isn't going to. Of course, I'm embarrassed. There was a little skin off. I lived through it. Wasn't a doctor out of the deal. But that's one of the. I'm sure the classmates that was there would think this was funny today yet, but that was. And Don never said another word about it after.
Myron Coleman, sometimes I get a little emotional or sentimental and stuff like this, so I'll try to keep it together. But I remember the day '93, I was going home from work, and I heard it announced on the radio that Don Burgher passed away, and I said, gosh, there's only one Don Burgher I know, and he's a hell of a man. So. But I do contribute to a lot of my meticulous in everything I do to him. All the classes that was mentioned earlier, I think I took every class he ever taught except electricity, and I'm an escalator elevator technician today. So, and a lot of people say I'm real meticulous. But I remember Don and I made contact across the room one day. I was doing something I wasn't supposed to, and here he comes. So he had that Vulcan pinch when you were doing something you weren't supposed to be doing. He goes, he grabbed me here and he says, "I got your attention?" I go, "Oh yeah." He goes, "Does that hurt?" I go, "No." And he squeezed hard. I go, "It hurts now though." But just A to Z, meticulous. He expected the very best, and if he felt you had that, he wanted more. He expected the best. He put what you built, what you made, he graded it, and he put it to the test. He maximized everything. He, hell of a guy. Total respect for him. So, he could go into an hour speech on a drill bit, the making of it, the composition of it, the sharpening of it, the figuring the speeds mathematically in a drill press, just on and on. He was an amazing guy. So
I remember too in small engines, he would bug an engine, and then you had to figure out what was wrong with it, and it was kind of deceiving in a way. I mean, if that was just something that a customer brought in, you'd know what to do. What we were trying to figure out was what little time you had with that. What did he do to it? You know? So it got to be kind of a sporting event almost. You know, sometimes an engine would run, but it would die, and then there was a ball bearing in the fuel line. You know, how come this engine ran just a minute ago and now it has no compression, and he did it in about a minute? What could he possibly have done? You unscrew the muffler, you take an ice cream stick, you break it off in the valve, and you put the muffler back on. No compression. Just stuff like that he bugged, and it made you troubleshoot things out. But like I said, it became more of a game because we were just trying to figure out what did he have time to do to it.
Now, which motors did you have at that time? I know at the end there there was a John Deere tractor engine and there was a Mustang engine. A Ford engine.
Well, they had a 289 on a stand.
Yeah.
And was there another one too?
No, I don't think so.
But the small engines was still Briggs.
Briggs and Stratton.
Oh,
Yeah, Briggs and
yeah,
Stratton.
Power
Yeah.
mechanics was
Yeah.
4-stroke and 2-stroke.
Okay.
And then, and you had to have power mechanic before you could take auto mechanics. So you had to have it your junior year and your senior year in that order, you know. You weren't gonna be accepted in auto mechanics if you didn't take power mechanics and pass that first.
Right.
But yeah, I remember one time, trying to turn over the lawnmower engine and it just locked up. We couldn't even turn it over. And like, what happened, like you said, in minutes,
Yeah.
that we can't turn this thing? Well, he had pulled the plug and dropped the nut in there and the piston was topping out at the nut at the head, you know, so you couldn't roll the crank over.
I remember in auto, I would go around, we had to go find a vehicle to work on. Of course, that wasn't gonna happen with my dad's vehicle, and I didn't have one of my own. So I would ask teachers. I remember Mr. Gearhart, he had a Torino, pretty nice Torino, but the teachers, a couple different teachers, was pretty easy on letting their cars be guinea pigs in the auto class with Mr. Burgher. It might have been because they had a trust in Mr. Burgher. Well, I think, yeah, sure.
His predecessor, Mr. Jokins, used to ask all the fathers what they had for farm machinery, and it got to be guinea pigs before that. That didn't work out so well, so then we moved to keeping an engine there, so if you couldn't get it fixed, it didn't stop putting up hay or something like that.
Yeah, didn't he have a calico truck, 4x? Didn't he, all kinds of colors, and he'd redone the engine. I think
Yeah,
that was-
Brownie, you mean?
We had a brown truck that he had put a new cab in, but that would have been
This had
late
a fender
80s.
and a hood and the box all different colors.
Oh, that
prime
one.
Oh.
He had a four-wheel drive.
Remember
was the
that?
Blue one. Blue
yeah
Chevy.
the blue truck. Yeah.
But I remember Brownie, and actually I remember a little red. For
Yeah,
a while they had a little red express truck.
Yeah.
That was kind of neat. That was kind of Polly's. Yeah. I'm Bob Keller. I graduated in 1979. I always grew up as a child as a tinkerer. I was going to be an inventor when I grew up. I never did that, but I always liked to work in the shop. My dad let me kind of have free reign of our shop at home, and so when I went to school took quite a few shop courses, woodworking and power mechanics, which is small engines, and auto mechanics and welding, and so I always appreciated Don. He, Mr. Burgher, we called him, but he was always. I agree with what somebody said here. He really felt like, I mean, he wanted you to do your best and push you to your limit, and that was good for all of us. And he commanded respect in the classroom. I really appreciated that. And then after a couple years of high school, I got my, I think about the time I was 16, last couple years, he asked me if I had any summertime employment lined up, and I didn't, so he asked me if I wanted to work at the boat shop, and so I joined Randy Howell here and worked at the boat shop in after school and on weekends or Saturday, and then through the summer vacations. So we had a lot of good times at working at the boat shop and at school, and I just really appreciated Don for a lot of things. One thing, my brother Dan, he said that he never knew anybody that seemed to have such a broad knowledge of so many areas, of whether it was automobiles or welding or fabricating or electricity, or Don just seemed to be an encyclopedia of information, and so we always was pretty amazed by his knowledge and his ability to impart that knowledge to us students. And
So I, and yet Don was, I just have many memories. One time I will say, and Randy, I'm sure maybe you remember this, but Don had sold a boat to a customer, and for some reason the fiberglass on the top deck wasn't quite right, or it needed some work, so we sent it off to I think we might have taken it loose around, but sent it off to the fiberglass shop, and they fixed the fiberglass and brought it back to the boat shop. And I think it was Randy and I, we caulked around and we pop riveted it back together and put the strip on, sent it out, and the customer came back. He was very upset. It just, when he drove through the water, it just poured water. Water came into the boat. And he was, in no uncertain terms, was telling Don, this boat is not acceptable and he expects some changes. Well, I think to Don's credit, this fellow, he was pretty harsh and really scolded Don, to put it mildly. And yet Don he had the character and I was just amazed by how he just listened to him. He didn't try to excuse himself, but he acted very professional, and he was very humble. And I think he ended up giving him a new boat, and then we had repaired that properly, and he resold the other boat. But anyway, in my mind, I was just impressed how Don was able to very well. He handled it very well. Very high character in that perspective, in that incident there. But there was a lot of just floods of memories. I remember whenever Don and Polly, and can't remember where the children were at what age or whatever, but when they got their new house, they moved. Randy and I don't remember who else, but we took boxes and boxes of stuff from the old double wide trailer home over to the.
You forgot that we painted.
Oh, okay.
Well,
yeah, we did a tremendous. Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of painting in this new Wausau home. It was a beautiful home, and so we helped move. And there's just many. I just remember. Try not to get too lengthy here, but I do remember one. Seemed like in the evening, about 7 o'clock, typical work. Whether it's summertime or during the school year, after I had my work done I'd come over, and Don and Polly be sitting around getting ready to eat supper, and ask them if there's anything more we should do at the boat shop, and they said no, it's fine. So then I'd go home, and I just really look forward to, and many things. We'd go to the lake. Oftentimes we'd go test boats out at Panorama and come home or get done there. Oftentimes we go water skiing. I really enjoyed that. Remember one time we pulled a barefoot skier. That was kind of fun. And so there's a lot of things. And so I just really appreciated Don and Polly and the family, and just all the things I learned there. Randy, you kind of grew up there, and you taught me a lot too. And we could go on and on about all the humorous and incidents and things that went on there. It was a good learning experience for us all. But so I just really appreciated Don, and I just one thing, Don wasn't really necessarily a man of faith, but I just encourage you. I'm sure if he'd be here today, he'd encourage us all to seek after the Lord and have a personal relationship with Jesus. And so I just life's been good, and I just really enjoyed being there and being with Don and being part of the Burgher family. So I just really, I think he taught me a tremendous amount. So I'm just very grateful for my experience with Don Burgher and the family. So
I just brought some of these things from high school. This particular thing, it's just more an ornament, but there's a lot to that. This was actually made out of wood to start with. Mm-hmm. And it was a split mold. In other words, this was cut in half, and then we rammed it up in sand, and then we casted it out of aluminum. And so if you were in Foundry, you were scavenging aluminum where you could get it. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Ned Freestone was overhauling a truck, and I cabbaged onto the pistons out of that truck and took them to class, and we melted them down. But then
once you got it out of the sand mold, then you had to finish it. So this involved taper turning on a lathe. You had to offset the ends. It had a center bore, had this little round thing at the end, and then we had to put the base in the overhead mill to true up everything. So there's a lot of, it doesn't really look like much, but if you look at all the steps that were involved with that, from wood and sand and an old piece of junked aluminum to this, there's a lot of steps. And what you're really trying to do is get you familiar with the machine, get you familiar with what the potential was for that lathe, what it could do for you. And this was another thing too that I think somehow we made, and this was another step, just the knurling. That was a whole other process. So I'll just pass these around just for whatever. And of course, this is my favorite one at the time. Of course, I was pretty partial to the red stuff. That's what I grew up with. And he had these lead letters, and this again was made out of wood to start with. And we ran that all up in a sand mold and casted it in aluminum, and then we did the finishing after that. And I wore that all through school for years, and that was kind of a keepsake from way back. So, but anyway. One thing I'll share, I got a whole list, so bear with me, and if anybody wants to add to this, please chime in, because I'll just keep going until you shut me off. So, one thing about Mr. Burgher, I remember he always addressed us as men. We weren't men, we were dumb kids. We were, but he always addressed us as men, and I think he treated us how he wanted us to become by that method.
Or gentlemen.
Yes, yes. And then I mentioned the foundry here. That was one of the other classes we took. But there's a particular incident that day that happened in foundry class, and Bob talked about his professionalism and everything. This is kind of a panic thing almost. This crucible was in the kiln, and that thing has to get up to over 1,200 degrees to melt aluminum. This thing's glowing red. It's as red as that chair. And he lifts it out with these special pliers, and then he starts pouring this molten aluminum into these sand molds that we made. The crucible broke. All this aluminum all over the floor. Do you guys remember that?
I can't remember.
Well, I do, but it took the finish clear off the floor. It could have been, damaging to somebody's toes if it would have run over. Who knows what could have happened. He kept his cool, his demeanor, and he told us to grab some shovels, start pooling it together until we could let it to cool and solidify. I mean, that's not in the in his playbook here to deal with this, but he handled it I thought in a real professional way, and nobody knew what to even do. So I was proud of him for that. The auto program, my parents were going to trade cars with Jack Cross there, and I asked him if I could have that old car. It was a 71 LTD, and that was my graduation present from my folks. And so I asked Mr. Burgher if we could overhaul that engine in class. It had a 400 V8 engine in it, and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we did. Well, we drove that thing for years until the things had rotted away. I made a parts washer. At that time, Safety Clean was coming out with these parts washers on a barrel. They were a unique design. Now I copied that design. I made a second one, and I sold it to Gary Belgard. He ran a truck shop there in Adel, and I got enough out of that to pay for mine, and I'm still using that thing today. Here's a question for any of you. Does anybody remember how many strokes a minute a hacksaw you were supposed to use?
I was going to say 40, but
150.
No, you'd have been buying the blade, because I bought said it was 32.
okay.
I was
32.
thinking 150. I don't know why.
So if you were going too fast, he got into you?
Yeah, we overheated the blade, and you bought that blade. Well, one time, this is right after school, and I had a few minutes. I had time just right that I could do something after school between getting on the bus and still making it home and not having to walk. I walked a couple of times, and I finally learned how to better time myself. So anyway, he's nowhere in the building. Okay, I'm going to get this done. I still have time. I'm just sawing away like crazy. And he comes out of the bathroom. He's looking up as he's washing his hands. He looks in the mirror, as Dale mentioned about that round sink up there by the wall. He says, "Button," he says, "guess what? You owe for another blade. When are you going to learn?" I don't know. I must have bought a gajillion blades through school. The itching powder. I don't know if you guys ever heard that story or not in the bathroom there. That was ground up fiberglass. And you talk about nasty stuff to sit on. Oh my gosh. But he and I both got into it. We both ended up going home. We never did figure out who put that there, but that was not fun at all. But one other time, he asked me if I knew what the price of dog food was today. Dog food? Where are you going with this? he says, you're going to find out what it's going to cost to feed a dog when you have to buy that seeing eye dog if you don't have your safety glasses on. One of the famous quotes that I remember from him, and I still apply this to my day, and Myron, you mentioned about how meticulous you were, and Bailey, you did the same. This was the same thing. You know, he says, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when are you going to have time to do it again? And you know, I've applied that. Sometimes I get in a rush trying to fix something so I can get going again. But I'm thinking, you know, if I shortcut this, I'm going to pay for it later. I know that. So that stuck with me all these years. This next one, I'm going to try and get through this. Give me a minute. Get my composure here. It's a good story. It just gets a little touchy-feely here. Here's why. But Bob and Randy both mentioned about how the Burghers just kind of welcome you into their family. And I remember Paula coming up to the shop one day, and there was a hallway, and we could see her, but Don couldn't see her, Paula as well at that point yet. And she was just giddy. She was just couldn't hardly contain herself. So finally we motioned to Mr. Burgher that Paula wanted to talk to him, and she motioned for him to come out in the hallway. Anyway, they both came back in the shop. Excuse me, just a minute. I'm going to get through this. I know I am. Anyway, he gave her a big hug and swung her around, and they shared with this group that they got to notice that they adopted Michael, and the adoption papers went through, and that was the happiest I'd ever seen a couple in my life. They were going to have a son.
How old were you then, Mike?
I was 3 months old.
I was thinking you were really young.
3 months old, yeah.
Didn't want to.
Because that would have been, it would have been December the 8th was the day they picked me up, so it would have been the week of December the 8th of 1977.
Pretty happy day for you too, huh?
Yeah, I was in good spirits.
Glad you can remember that.
Yeah, very sharp.
Anyway, I'm sorry to get so emotional. That was one thing that I remember them that they included the whole class in that little ceremony there, if you will.
I remember that too.
Let's see. In my senior year, we had a fire here, and at that time I was fixing lawnmowers, and it was a total loss. I lost all my parts inventory, all my tools, everything, and several customer lawnmowers. And Don came to me. He says, the only way I know to help you get on your feet is to give you opportunity. He says, if you want to use the shop evenings and weekends, I'll let you. Well, that gave me full access to tools, so I was back in business again because of him. Until Henkenius ruined it. I was standing there late one night, and he noticed that the lights were on in the shop, and came in there and wanted to know what I was doing here. Well, I didn't want to rat out Don. I didn't want to get him in trouble. I mean, he was doing me a favor here. So I'm thinking, what can I do without lying? So I said, well, I'm working on my project. And he goes, well, you here by yourself? And I just looked around. I said, I guess it kind of looks that way. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I got caught. That's what it boiled down to, And he goes, well, you can't be here by yourself. So he says, you shut off the lights and leave. But after that, I could stay after school as long as Don was still there and working. And he'd let me in on some Saturdays when nobody was around. But I still remember that. He went out on a real limb for me to do that. That was quite an opportunity for me. And it helped me. It helped me get on my feet again. What I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to do this even in junior high, because they had this, we'd go through a test of some kind, and you stick this long pin through some goofy thing, and it'd pull out a card, and whatever it was that you were going to do for a career. And that didn't work, but I saw a guy splitting a tractor, and that's what I want to do. I wanted to be an ag mechanic. So I thought, well, going to DMAC, would be a bigger, better version of what high school shop class was. That's really what I thought it would be. And I learned some things there. We were the first group through that program, and but it wasn't the same at all. Not at all. I mean, the caliber of teachers just wasn't there. Don set the standard. And in fact, if you didn't even show to class, teachers didn't care because it just lightened their load. So the drive wasn't there. I mean, if you didn't come to Don's class and you knew you were supposed to be there, there was a phone call home, or he was calling the office to see where you're at. I mean, there was strict accountability, and he did a tremendous job with that. When I walked into my freshman year in high school in the shop class, I didn't even know what a welder looked like. The only thing I knew about welding was what I was told, not to look at it. And I remember my pedal tractor, my 806 pedal tractor that my grandpa bought me when I was a kid. I ran the wheels off of that thing twice, broke the axle, and Grandpa would take it to Shields there in Dallas Center to have it welded. And I could see that bright light reflecting off the ground, off dirt. That's how intense the light was, and that's why I was told never to look at that. Well, that's all I knew about welding when I walked in there. Needless to say, after 4 years of Mr. Burgher, and he would teach us on the advanced level as well, on the welding end of it. Well, anyway, long story short, as I was going to DMAC, a fellow by the name of Gene Kirkendall, he was the night shift superintendent at EFCO, which stood for Economy Forms. They made steel forms for concrete. And they were looking for welders, and he wanted to know if I'd be interested. I said, well, I'll try it. So I welded nights there while I was going to DMAC, and that was another extension of my education. But had it not been for Don and his teachings, I would have never got that job. And it was a tremendous, again, that was an extension of my education, except this time I didn't have to write a check for it. Later on at DMAC, part of the program was welding. So I asked the teacher, I said, you know I'm welding nights at a factory here. I said, is there any way I can test out of this? And for that hour, I'd love to just go home and go to bed. Give me an hour's sleep, It's 12:30 is when I get off. Teacher said, well, we'll see. So I did all the tests and passed them. And I said, now am I good to go? Can I go home and go to sleep? He said, no. He says, you're going to have to take this class. I said, why? I thought I passed. He says, you did. He says, I need you to help me teach this class. And I'd have probably been more flattered about that if I wasn't so tired. But all I did was kind of make me mad because I really wanted that hour of sleep. But I guess that was complimentary. But again, that's not about me. This is about Don teaching me this. So, and as I continue this, I'm going to elaborate more about what I was able to do. But again, it's not about me as I'm telling the story. It's about what I was taught.
That was Don that said he wanted you to.
No, this is my DMAC teacher. So, anyway, that job enabled me to. I was welding right alongside of laid-off pipe welders, and then at that time, Massey Ferguson had laid off. They had a plant there on Fleur Drive. They made the four-wheel drive tractors there, and they basically had shut down. And so there's all those that came on board too. I was drawing the same wages as a dumb kid that those welders that really were experienced were doing because of Mr. Burgher. At break times, they made you take a break every 2 hours. That's nothing we were accustomed to in school by any means. But anyway, I would just explore the plant. It was 10 acres under roof, it was a huge place, and I was just fascinated with all these big overhead hoists, the paint line, everything. The sheet metal shop, the press room. It was just fascinating. And one night I was walking along and I saw this maintenance guy. He's up on a ladder drilling a hole, and he's just cussing up a Blue Street, and he's really leaning hard on this drill. So I motioned for him. I said, "Your drill is dull." And I thought he might get mad at me after I said that, pointing this out. I'm just a dumb kid. He's probably been there for 30 years. Finally gets down off the ladder. I said, "You just need to sharpen your drill bit." I said, "I'll do that for you." He says, "How are you going to do that?" I said, "All I need is a bench grinder." He said, "Well, I got one over here in his little room." It was just a wire cage where the maintenance guys kept their tools at that time, so nobody would run off with them. Walked over there and put an edge on this drill bit, and I cautioned him. I said, "Now it's going to cut, so don't be leaning on that thing like you were a minute ago because you're on a ladder. It's going to cut." He didn't pay attention to me. He about fell off the ladder because he didn't prepare for that thing to cut like it did. Anyway, the next night, I remember this guy was seeking me out, and he found me, and he handed me this Folgers coffee can full of these dull drill bits. I want to know when I could get these sharpened for him. You've never seen anybody sharpen them like that. He says, "How did you learn to do that, by the way?" I said, "It's easy. That's the best high school shop teacher ever. He said, you learned that in high school? I said, yeah, how old do you think I am? You know? But anyway, I said, I'll do one better yet. I said, I'll teach you how to do this. And so I did. And he was amazed how simple that was. And I proceeded to tell him, you know, he said, well, how did you actually learn it? I said, well, Mr. Burgher would give us a drill bit. He would measure that length to start with before he ever gave you the bit. And he wrote that down. That was your bit at the moment. You had to sharpen it, and then you had to do a test drill with it. If it wasn't cutting on both sides of the flute, you didn't grind it right. Then, if it did that, then he would mic the hole. And depending on the size of the hole in comparison to the drill, would determine your grade. And then we weren't done yet. Then he had to do the final measurement on the length, how much you took off of the bit to determine whether you were going to buy it. So it's quite a process there. But I'll tell you what, that is, I can still sharpen a twist drill to this day. And Jeff will attest for that. And there's so many things like this, and I'm rambling on. I don't want to be boring anybody to tears with this stuff, but this is stuff that has just stuck with me all these years, and it's all because of one guy. So, and like I said, this wasn't about me sharing all this and what I've accomplished. This was about what I was able to do under his leadership and his guidance. And the one thing, and this has been mentioned before, Bobby hit on it real good, and so did Dale and some others. He was a man that would encourage you, and he was a real encouragement to me. And if he saw potential in you, he pushed you and he challenged you. And this place where we live was the dividing line between Adel and Dallas Center. You know, we're this much. Either way, I could have went to a different school. And I'm thinking the outcome would have been entirely different for me. Entirely different. So my point with this in closing here, to have had access to such a great teacher has been a lifelong blessing for me. There hasn't been a day goes by when I haven't used some kind of skill that he taught me, and it's just been a real treat to have had a guy, not only as a teacher that I looked up to, not only as an adult figure or to kind of pattern myself off of, but as a true friend. And I forgot one other story. I got to back up just a little bit. But this is the kind of character that Don was. After that fire, my graduation night at the ceremony, this is all about numerous trips for the smart people, going up there and getting their awards for sports and their check for whatever college that they were going to seek out, and, you know, grants and scholarships and that kind of thing. And you watch the normal half a dozen people that are, you know, brainiacs and just going trip back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you almost felt sorry for them because you knew they were going to be tired at the end of the night because they made so many trips. I thought I heard my name mentioned. I thought, well, that was a mistake. There's no way that was my name. I sat there and I froze. Pretty soon, I sat there long enough, they called my name a second time, and only this time for sure I heard it. It wasn't mine. And I remember sitting next door to Lori Cadwell because it was alphabetical order. Finally, she thumped me in the ribs with her elbow. She says, "What's the matter with you, stupid? Don't you know your own name? Get up there." So I hesitantly got out and walked up. And this was a scholarship that I'd never heard of. And it was $200. And I know, excuse me, I know that Don Burgher put this together with the other teachers. And that meant a lot. They bought books and went to DMAC the next year. So, needless to say, I've never met a man that has had more impact on me personally. And I wouldn't be the man that I'm at and where I'm at had it not been for him. Anyway, I've rambled on enough, so thanks for listening.
The first time I'd ever heard that story, or even heard that anybody knew of that story about the day that Mom and Dad were going to adopt me, was from you sitting in a meeting with I was sitting with some administrators from the school, and we were talking about a scholarship that Monty was going to put together in Dad's name. And so this would have been what year?
2016.
2016. And I had never heard that story before. And I mean, it was as hard as it was for you to tell. it was hard for me to hear it, especially that first time. I had never dreamed that there was a fly on the wall, somebody that was noticing what was going on when that all went down. And so for me to hear that firsthand account was a piece of my history, a view into, because when you mention that, my kids, they don't know the shop, where every single one of us, I know exactly where she was standing, right next to his office. I know the poster on the wall. I know that walking in, there's the lathe to the left, the tables to the right, the big block wood tabletops that he'd sand down every year and put kids to work refinishing all the time, and the old gray, primered table chairs, and just the smell of the foundry, the smell of the oil in the shop, just the smell of the shop. And so I can put myself in that place, and I can view that story through you and all of these stories, as you're talking about, somebody back at the welding station, with the cigarette butts. I can put myself in that spot, and I only had 1 year of school with Dad, my freshman year, and a bunch of my buddies were in shop class. One of them came up to me and said, "Hey, there's a kid over there chewing." But of course, nobody wants to be the narc and tell on your buddy. But at the same time, this guy was kind of being a turd, so we were like, "All right, we're gonna set him straight." And he's trying to get away with something. So of course they tell me. I walk over to Dad and say, "Hey, Dad, come here." "Oh yeah, such and so he's back in that back station chewing." Dad walked back there. Very similar story. Flips off the welder, pulls back the curtain, takes his helmet, pulls his helmet off, looks at him, grabs him by his bottom lip, and drags him out of the shop by his lip. And as he was walking, everybody shut down and sit down. Nobody makes a word. Nobody says a peep. Everybody sits down. Oh my gosh, what is going on? So we all sit down, petrified. Nobody says a word. We're all by ourselves in the shop. Nobody says a word. And everybody looks at me and says, "Oh my, your dad is mad." I'm like, "Yeah, he's for real." And he wasn't, he's 5'8". He wasn't a huge man. We build him out. Like in my mind, as a 15-year-old, I think, man, my dad was like a mountain. But he wasn't a huge man. He wasn't but that presence, as I said earlier, that presence that he had was just like immense. Anyway, so he comes back and he says, "I'm going to be back here in 2 minutes. I don't know where that can of chew is, but we better find it." And he walks back out that shop door towards the school. And he had given the can of chew to this girl. There was one girl in the class, and he gave it to her. And she's like, "I don't want to give it up. I don't want to get in trouble." I said, "You give it to me, and I'll just put it right in the middle of the table, and we'll leave it at that." And he will not ask any questions. And if he asks, I just won't say a word about it. Okay, so he comes back in, grabs the can of chew, says thank you, and walks back out, and that was basically the end of it. The rest of us were not involved. But he was, this is what's going to happen, this is my expectation, this is what we're going to do, and that's how he proceeded forward with his time. In my high school career, I only got 3 detentions. In 4 years, I got 3 detentions. 2 of those were from the art teacher. One was my freshman year for not washing the table. One was my senior year for locking a kid in the bathroom. That's a whole other story. But my freshman year, the only other detention I ever got was from my dad. Because we had a general shop book. And as freshmen, when I was in school, we had a general shop class where we did rocketry and plastics and metals and small engines and kind of a dabble of everything, so you had an idea of what was in store as you proceeded forward with high school. A little bit of CAD and those sorts of things. Anyway, so we so anyway, we're dabbling with these different things and just a ton of good memories. I can't. Where was I going? What was I talking?
Detention.
Oh yeah. So I forgot. So I had this book that we were supposed to bring, and I left it in my locker. And he says, "That's your one. You forget it again, and it's going to be an hour." I'm like, okay, whatever. So the next day, literally the next day, it left at my locker. I'm like, hey, I got to run to my locker quick. That's an hour, Burger. So of course, me thinking, all right, these other guys might be intimidated by Don Burgher, but I got the goods on him. I'll schmooze him when I get home. And I said, Dad, let's talk about this detention. You bring it up again, you're going to double your time. I said, fair enough. That was the end of it. And but that's the kind of, as we all know, that's just the kind of expectation that not only he held for kids, as the men, as the other guys in the classroom, but he held himself to that standard a lot. His, and Randy and Monty know as well as anybody, he did not hold his own personal workbench at the boat shop to the same expectation as he did at the school, because you cleaned your tools, you put your tools away, everything was in its spot, and it was ready for the next group to come in. The boat shop was different, because that was his world, and you know, he just didn't have the time or the energy or the mental whatever to put every tool, clean every tool. Although I will say I spent plenty of hours at that solvent tank scrubbing tools, wiping things down, putting things away, fetching this, fetching that, get me a pop, go make me a sandwich, go answer a phone, you know, pull this, you know, get that motor, bring it over here. What are you doing? I remember one time walking through the shop, and I don't even know why I did it, but I spit on the floor. I said, "What are you doing?" I don't know. Spit on the floor. He's, pardon the language, but he's, "Do you shit where you eat?" And whoa, well, you behave better than that, you know. Or he, as you said earlier, he'd give you the thump. He had that nub finger, and he'd come up, rock you right on the top of the head. Oh my God! Like, he'd give you just an instant headache. Give you the nub, and right on the head, but you know, what a interesting guy with lots of, you know, these awesome stories and everything, and I appreciate everybody's perspective, and you know, as colorful a character as he was, as we all know, you know, there's always that other side to him that sometimes you see and sometimes you don't. And I didn't have the ability to talk with him. I didn't have the ability to, like Randy or Monty or Mike Thomas or Rod Walters, or on and on and on and on. I was never able to sit across the table from him, have a beer and say, hey, let's talk about life. I never had that ability. You know, unfortunately, he passed away when I was only, you know, a 15-year-old kid. But through these stories, as I was telling Monty earlier, through these stories, you know, a little piece of him gets passed on to Brooklyn and Brody and to my other kids, because they'll never have the ability to even talk with him. I remember, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, somebody had posted this. There was like a little video that they had done, the teachers had done for the seniors, where each teacher said a word. I can't remember what Dad's word was. Courageous. And And he said that one word, and that's the first time I'd heard his voice in 20 years or more at that point.
It was on the day you and Tara got married.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, we were at the.
We were in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, it was the day I got married. So it was 3 years ago, nearly. So, and that's the first time that either one of my kids had ever heard his voice. And I remember Brody saying, he kind of has a, Dad had kind of a nasally voice. And I never really I thought of him as having kind of this thunderous, masculine, just because of the persona that he would come with. But no, he was just kind of had a nasally, normal guy. But man, did he come with a whole lot of there was a lot behind his name rather than just him,
He was liver, I remember.
Yeah.
He could say 2 words to get your attention.
Yeah, oh yeah. And he would have, if he didn't get your attention with words, he had his attention getters. And but again, it was all kind of in fun, He had a unique, very dry sense of humor, very dry. And if you didn't get that dry sense of humor, if you weren't paying attention, you weren't going to get it. And there are lots of teachers over the years that I've been able to interact with that have had that dry sense of humor. But very few people with, as was said numerous times, the knowledge base of how to work with innumerable amounts of things. He might not know everything about everything, but you'd fool me, because it seemed like he did. He was a one of a kind. We need a lot of people like him in the world, and a lot of educators. Although if he was a teacher today, he'd probably be fired the first day, because I personally saw him. There was a kid with a welding helmet on over his face, acting like Darth Vader. And we're all giggling and laughing at him because Dad had walked in the back door and didn't see him coming, walking around. Whacked right in his face and dropped him on his butt. He pulled that helmet up. He's like, "Go sit down." And he just went, no 2 words about it. Today's world, obviously, we're in a different world than we were, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So, but again, I appreciate the stories personally, but more than me appreciating the stories that you've all shared today. I appreciate it for Brooklyn, Brody, Hank, Etta, my wife, and my extended family that's going to be able to go on and hear some of these stories of Dad and his work and a little bit of nugget inside of what he was doing. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Well, there you go. That's I could go on days and days telling stories of the 15 years that I got to spend with my dad, and I love to be able to capture all these stories and things like that. But we'll save that fun for another time. All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me on this one, and hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you can check out some other of my videos. All right. Have a good one.